anticipate. I do believe that it's been an opportunity for certain technologies to leap forward, and I don't think that that ground will be lost. I'm not. I'm not seeing real evidence of a quote a backlog happening. It feels like everything's on a pause, and if everything's on a pause, then when we start up, it likely is going to. There certainly will be spots of it. Bankruptcy is going to surge, things like that. But having said that, if this crisis continues for a long time, if we're looking at not having a vaccine until mid 2021, and we're dealing with this to the end of 2021 or into 2022, then I think that's very hard to predict. I think that we are looking at, again, technology changes having an impact on this, rule changes and law changes having an impact. But I think then we're facing, starting to understand the psychological impact on this on a generation of people. And then we have to deal with questions in my specific case about things like, how long is it really going to be before a court is willing to bring in 120 people for jury selection and put them into a jury box? I don't know the answer to that yet. And there's good discussion going on around that. So my crystal ball basically is, if we clear this up quickly, which I don't think we will, it will probably have minimal impact other than some technologies leaping forward. If it drags on, we need to have this conversation again in November. And I think it'll be a very different conversation.
Tony, what's your crystal ball telling you? Lasting impact on the industry?
Yeah, lasting impact is, in conversations with clients, there's two schools of thought of it. One is what I call, we're going to go back to normal conversation. Attorneys will continue to want to do depositions as they've done. Courts will open up. There's another school of thought that I'm hearing for customers, which is it's a new normal. I think I'm more in line with what I'm hearing to the new normal. And I just want to reflect that with two questions that actually a customer brought up with me. Even if courts open, and they're going to have to open in a very cautious way, there are procedures being put out now by the U.S. Court Administrative Office on how they're going to do that. What happens if a deponent or a witness is not willing to go back in a room regardless of their state or court opening? And what about an at-risk population that's suddenly larger than it's been before? How do we handle them? So I think looking at that at a bigger societal level, there's going to be lasting change. There's going to be more adoption of technology. But to what Steve was saying, whether that's 6 months or 12 months, I think it's early yet. But I think inevitably, as more of the industry is exposed to the technology and changes in procedures, we're going to head somewhere back to a new normal than going back to what we've done before.
Okay. Billy, same question. Crystal ball, lasting impact on the industry.
So I like the crystal ball question, so I'm willing to put myself out there a bit. I think this is going to have profound, or COVID that is going to have profound changes on our industry. First and foremost, any court reporting firm or service provider that has not adopted or taken into or implemented new technology or being able to support it, I think they're going to get left behind. I think that lost market share is gone for them forever. Because I think location is going to be a secondary condition when our clients are scheduling depositions. Similar to firms that carry lots of debt, there was a lot of free money out there pre-COVID, and a lot of firms took on substantial debt, and I think those firms are suffering now and are going to continue to suffer through this COVID pandemic. And then third, I think these law firms are adopting this technology. And so I think we're going to see more and more firms requesting it, some of them even requiring it. Tony raised an excellent point that you can have all the states you want open up and ease restrictions, right? But if I have a witness who says, I'm not going around other people to take my deposition, or if I have a stenographer that says, I don't feel safe being around other people, I'm not going to put him or her into harm's way. Right? I have to protect our employees. I have to protect our independent contractors. And so those firms that haven't adopted the technology are going to get left behind. And I think a result of that will be further consolidation in the court reporting provider space because of it.
Interesting. Okay, next slide, and Bill, you're going to be on the hot seat again. Well, what variety of legal proceedings, length, type of litigation, type of client, whatever else, are best or worst suited to being conducted remotely?
So every single one of them, we have done all of them, and whether it's a mediation, deposition, hearing, a trial, or anything in between, we have done each of them remotely, and they're all well suited to be conducted remotely. I think the key is having buy-in from the attorneys or from your clients, right? So it's incumbent upon us to educate them about the technology, give them demos, make sure that they know what our security protocols are and how they're in place, and how our stenographers are keeping their data secured. And you know, that is going to be the key to making these proceedings accepted and part of the new normal. So, you know, number one is the attorney buy-in. And I think that's coming, because I can just tell you over the last 4 weeks, we've given at Planet Depots over 200 webinars to attorneys and their support staff. So over 2,000, 3,000 people have already seen remote capabilities. And I can tell you the response from most of them has been, why didn't I do this sooner? You know, why was I traveling from Boston to San Francisco for a one-day deposition? That doesn't make any sense. The amount of expense to my clients and my lost time to go do that, it's not worth it. Now I can see I can do it right through Zoom or through WebEx or through any of these platforms, and it's a piece of cake, and I'm home in time for dinner. So I just think the buy-in from the client is key.
Steve, same question. Best or worst suited from your to remote from your perspective?
So I think up to a point, I would agree with Billy that virtually all of them can be adapted to remote. There are certainly differences between relatively simple matters with a few participants versus proceedings with a judge that have multiple participants, criminal arraignments where they're going through multiple cases at one time. There's logistical differences between purely oral arguments or discussions versus handling exhibits within the court environment. All of those can be resolved. They're simply procedural, and there are technical solutions available to it. The one, again, that we are talking about now, and we're not seeing a good answer to, are jury trials. Jury trials present really challenging questions to be done remotely. Again, not so much technically. Some that can be done technically, and I think there's a really good argument that some of this should be done remotely or via video and via recording. But we are confronted with the constitutional question of people having a right to a jury by their peers. I think you probably will see the virtual elimination of civil jury trials during this age. It's just going to be very difficult to do. And I don't think any of the participants are going to be willing to delay long enough to figure out how to do it. But on criminal matters where jury trials are a constitutional right that you have, I'm not sure where that's going. And the way it currently is structured, I'm not seeing good remote recording solutions.
I think we're all feeling what sequestration would feel like if you're on a jury right now. If we can move to the next slide. And what you'll see here is just the states that have made some type of accommodation, and at least that I was able to get my hands on from by yesterday, and I thank Lexitas for making that resource available. But these are the states that have made some level of accommodation to enable remote proceedings. So that leads into my next question. You can go to the next slide, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being shocked. How surprised are you of states' willingness to change their notary laws and otherwise accommodate remote proceedings? And what other changes and accommodations do you think are necessary? And we're going to start with you, Steve.
I don't think any of that has surprised me. Again, I think that when I said that people are responding rationally, That includes judges and Supreme Courts who are passing these rules. Everybody quickly realized the urgency of the matter. When you talk about things like notary laws, and there are a number of other laws that would fall into this category, I think people understood that some of these needed to be addressed anyway, and they were just ignored because there was no urgency to it. So now what we've got are a lot of emergency rulings or waivers of rules or laws that we see across the country. And I'm not surprised at all that they did that. Some of those will roll back as we come out of this, but I think we're also looking at a number of them becoming permanent changes. And I think that's probably a good thing.
Billy.
Okay.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, I give it a 1, being that I wasn't surprised at all. It was very evident to me that the rules needed to be relaxed and changed for legal proceedings to move forward. Again, having any sort of limitations on administering the oath, for example, is a delay in the legal process. So again, I don't think our clients want that for their clients, and they needed to be changed. And it's unfortunate it took a pandemic for states to realize that their notary laws were outdated. But no, I wasn't surprised at all because they were archaic.
Yeah.
All right, next slide, please. And now we're going to get to workforce, but how are your people adjusting to the reality? What's proving to be most difficult for reporters and others to navigate with remote proceedings? And Tony, this time we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, from Burbert's perspective, obviously we were very adapted to go to remote. From what I'm hearing from our customers, we've had some customers that were more prepared to go to remote, others that had to act quickly, but most of them are operating remote, and they're coping well.
Billy, thinking about your people, your reporters, how are they reacting?
They have been great. I mean, I have to say that the stenographers have really stood up and tackled this head on. They adjusted immediately and early with us, and we required it. So, I mean, once we got wind in Asia with our practice that this was affecting our business, we brought it stateside immediately, and we got all of our court reporters on trainings, on webinars, updating their security equipment, getting new pieces of software or hardware for them, educating our clients. So from our team, I've been super impressed, not only from our court reporters, but also the PD staff. We are all working remotely, and it's just been such a great group effort to really make it happen for our clients.
Okay. All right. If we can move to the next slide, please. And this, I think, is a cartoon that just gets to the point that Billy made earlier. It says, my God, those meetings really could have been done by email. And that, if you can move to the next slide, it's possible that some attorneys and judges will more regularly ask, and we've talked about this a little bit, but let's get into it more, ask, why can't we do this remotely? How can the industry prepare for this? And we're going to go to Steve on this one to start.
So again, I think it is important to make the distinction between the court market and the freelance market here. I would also agree that the courts generally have done a great job of stepping up and doing what needs to be done. But I think we need to acknowledge that all of us are kind of in this, I don't want to call it a honeymoon period, but this period where everybody understands why we have to do this right now. So people are tolerant of things not necessarily going as smoothly as they should sometimes, because they know this has to be done. That will last for a certain amount of time, but certainly as we come out of this crisis, if we want or we expect attorneys and judges to believe that this is a viable method for them to conduct their business going forward, then during this time, we better figure out how to get it right. And getting it right means bringing a very professional approach to it, dealing with the technical issues, dealing with the logistical issues, dealing with the security issues. There's just a whole range of things that are being not overlooked right now. I don't mean to say that, but When there's a failure, it's being accepted. That's not going to happen. So the one thing that we can do to prepare the industry going forward is to figure out how to do this right. And that's going to be slightly different in the different settings. There will be specialists to do different types of remote hearings, I suspect. But that's going to be the key. I think there is a better chance that judges and attorneys come out of this feeling positive about the experience, but there is a very real risk that they come out of this feeling negative about it and simply want to go back to in-person proceedings as much as possible. So it's our responsibility to making sure it falls
Tony.
the right.
Steve? Oh, I'm sorry. Jim, did you call me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony. Same question.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, there was a little break there in the audio. I just wanted to point out a few examples of, are they going to ask why we can't do this remotely? I know for a fact they're already asking this. Perhaps it's not as broad as we would like, particularly on the technology side. And how are they preparing for it? At least they're starting to think about it and test it for those who already don't use it. However, I think if you just do a quick Google search, you'll find numerous examples of how courts themselves and even some law firms have moved forward remote. I'm going to point out three particular instances: Florida, 11th Circuit Court,
Okay.
criminal and less, Texas, and California. I'm sorry, Jim, I think the audio broke again.
Yeah, it's bleeping a little bit.